Chapter 12. We're hunting monsters tonight. April 6th, 2086. Alpena, Michigan. The end of winter brought a wet and muddy spring to the region. To the west of Alpena, the Thunder Bay River burst its banks, swollen by snowmelt. None of the trees had leaves yet, but a smattering of green buds could be seen. Birds sang while newborn animals made their first furtive journeys away from their homes. Even further to the west, there was a strange collection of buildings. The complex was connected to the city by a single paved road. It was a mixture of old and new buildings here. Most of the newer structures were white, ultra-modern designs and had the blue insignia of the United Nations across their facades. But there were also half a dozen buildings built in a sinister-looking utilitarian design. These black and red structures were unnamed and unlabeled, but each structure had a mark on its side, showing the exact spot where the insignia of the old Advent Coalition used to be. 50 years ago, this place had been a top-secret Blacksite for the Advent Coalition. The government denied its existence, and whatever happened inside these walls was a closely guarded secret. Now, in the present day, this place was a top-secret Blacksite for the United Nations. The government denied its existence, and whatever happened inside these walls was a closely guarded secret. A mixed force of soldiers and armed androids were guarding the Blacksite. Men armed with laser rifles occupied watchtowers and sentry posts, while bright red androids patrolled the perimeter in groups of 3. The facility was completely secured. At least, that's what everyone inside of it believed. Over the past 5 days, the Blacksite was very slowly surrounded. So slowly, in fact, that the people inside had no idea that a hostile force was preparing to attack. Deep in the surrounding wilderness, 12 attackers were hidden well. Wearing brown and gray camouflage, they flitted through the forest floor like wraiths. When they reached the southern tip of Lake Winya, the group split up. 2 smaller teams were formed. Each group consisted of 6 members. 2 Stormbreakers, 2 Wolverines, 2 Chippewas. Like the Wolverines, the Chippewas were a team of guerrilla fighters loyal to the old United States of America. Their leader was Emerson Deering, a grizzled outdoorsman who had not set foot in a major city for the past 50 years. With a hunting rifle slung across his shoulder, Emerson led the first team, consisting of Varian Robinson, Setla Shunan, Lawrence Ridge, Sarah Roberts, and a member of the Chippewas named Austin Hilliker. There was Dakota Walter, a Chippewa fighter who was so old that the rest of the team was worried he might just lay down and rejoin the Earth at any moment. He was leading the second team. Piper Russell, Corder Lang, Jay Lansing, Kingi, and a Chippewa named Bradley Mara brought up the rear. The 2 teams parted ways and very slowly encircled the Blacksite. They took their time, camping out deep in the forest and living off the land. By the morning of the 5th day, the Stormbreakers and Americans had the Blacksite at their mercy. Every weakness in the defenses was found. Each of the guards were accounted for. The schedule of the starport was known, and traffic on the main road was understood. Just after 8 o'clock in the morning, a starship lifted off from the Blacksite. Supply trucks left the depot and the gates were closed. No one else would enter or leave for the next 45 minutes. It was now or never. With a soft humming noise, 4 metal objects, each roughly the size of a football, flew out of the forest toward the android patrols. The androids did not have enough time to realize that these were gremlin drones, a fully autonomous combat robot. With a series of loud cracks, like bolts of lightning, birds flew in all directions as the android defenders collapsed to the ground, inert. One of the guard towers tried to raise an alarm, but it was too late. There was a flash of crimson light, and 2 sentries fell without ever knowing they'd been hit. From atop a nearby hill, Kingi wielded a laser sniper rifle, picking off targets rhythmically, pausing only for the occasional breath. Each time he dropped a UN soldier, Kingi whispered into the radio, "North Tower, sharpshooter down. You're clear to move up." Varian and Emerson led their team along the fence line until they reached the main gate. 2 UN soldiers were talking into their radios, calling for backup. "I've got this," Kingi spoke through the radio. Neither of the 2 men at the gate realized they were being shot at until they were both on the ground. Then Setla turned his attention to the metal gate blocking their path. Austin Hilliker looked at Setla and asked, "What's he gonna do?" "Use your head," Varian replied. "How else would a 400-pound Mycor open a gate?" Setla reared up to his full height and roared. Then he charged forward and simply smashed through the metal gate as though it was a shrub. Stormbreakers, Wolverines, and Chippewas surged into the Blacksite. The attack had barely begun when Lawrence called out, "We've got people coming out of the buildings!" Men and women emerged from the surrounding buildings, their hands raised above their heads. One of them, a scientist carrying a clipboard, yelled at the Stormbreakers, "Don't shoot! We're unarmed!" In a matter of about 5 minutes, the entire population of the Blacksite had surrendered. Some 70 people emerged from the facility and were soon lined up in rows in the central courtyard, where they were being frisked for intel by Dakota Walters' team. "Fan out!" Varian told the others. "Search everywhere!" Quarter summoned the gremlin drones back to her and downloaded their reports into her tablet computer. "All of the anti-aircraft weapons are disabled," she informed Varian. "We can bring Niagara in now." Varian nodded and spoke into his, or her, radio. "Mockingbird and Uplink, the skies are blue." A loud roar of engines told everyone on the ground the spaceplane was now flying in a circle above the Blacksite, looking for a place to land. The voice of Maui Riri Nui replied over the radio. "Intel, folks! I want intel! Scan the computers, go through the pockets of anyone you drop, and for the love of Jericho, don't burn anything!" Dakota took the other 3 Chippewas and started going through the pockets of surrendered scientists. Very quickly, a pile of flash drives, data cores, and scraps of paper appeared in the courtyard. Meanwhile, the Wolverines started to ransack the surrounding buildings. Setla carried an armful of laptop computers to the landing pad just as the Niagara touched down. As the boarding ramp descended, Robert Lansing, George Farshty, and Inez Espinosa disembarked, followed closely by Nainu and Maui. The 2 Stormbreakers carried a computer terminal and an extension cable with them. "The hyperwave relay is already linked to the Shadow Man," Maui reported. "Just start plugging stuff into the terminal, and Nainu will upload it to his server." Standing on the edge of the landing pad, Emmanuel folded his arms and let out an impressed whistle, watching as the Blacksite was systematically looted. You guys have done this before, huh?" he said. The UN had a deep space Blacksite near Wolf 359, Maui explained. "This place is so much easier than that one, though." "How come?" "Well, the Shadow Man is on Earth," Maui replied. "Transmitting the data to him is easier since we're on the same planet." "Shadow Man?" Emmanuel repeated. "Who is that?" "Our boss," Maui said. "He never shows himself. We don't even know his name. And he covers his tracks better than Scarlett Freeman did." "Sounds like he and my wife would have gotten along," Emmanuel grumbled. "I'm sure glad I don't have to meet him." "Don't count your husi just yet," Maui replied, referencing a bird native to his homeworld. "The last time we spoke to the Shadow Man, he was really interested in you. I don't think you're off the hook." Around the same time, 2 starships from the United States reached the Blacksite and dropped off nearly 100 American soldiers. Unlike the UN military, aliens still made up a sizable portion of the American army. Partogans, Levakians, Higarans, Tydan, Skildari, and Blorg disembarked and started helping to process the prisoners. An American warlord also disembarked, introducing herself as General Andrea Jackson. She gave the Stormbreakers a curt greeting, sticking around just long enough to confirm that she was loyal to the old American government before going off to ensure the UN Blacksite was placed under her personal control. "She's not one for talking, is she?" Varian asked. "Actually, it's because of us," Sarah said. "General Jackson used to be with the Cheyenne government. Last time we met, Lawrence murdered Jackson's brother." "The bastard had it coming," Lawrence grumbled as he watched General Jackson walk away. "Especially after what he did to your sister, Sarah." Varian, Corder, Nainu, Setla, and Kingi followed the Americans back to their starship. Meanwhile, Maui struck off on his own. The young Partogan was still interested in scanning the captured Blacksite with his smart glasses. Out of curiosity, Piper Russell and Inez Espinosa followed him. While Maui analyzed everything around him, he leaned towards Emmanuel and asked, "Professor, before you left the UN, didn't you say they were working on some kind of secret weapon program?" "Oh, I did," Emmanuel answered. "It's called the Prometheus Project, or Prometheus Program, depending on who you ask. But the whole project was segmented and compartmentalized. I only knew bits and pieces of it. I can't even tell you what it's supposed to be, honestly." "But it is a weapon," Piper said. "You're sure of that part?" "I am." Emmanuel sounded confident. "It's definitely a weapon of some kind. The scale of the project and the level of secrecy around it is reminiscent of the Manhattan Project of the old world." Piper scratched her head. I've never heard of it." "About a century before Jericho, the United States invented nuclear weapons," Emmanuel explained. "They called it the Manhattan Project, and it was equally as secret as Prometheus. Nobody knew the full story, only the little pieces of the whole they were supposed to be working on." Maui scanned a nearby building and detected something of interest. As he started walking towards the entrance, he called back to the others. "Maybe we're about to find a couple of those pieces for ourselves." Maui was staring hard at the digital display on his smart glasses. He followed the pulsing signal through the dark facility, moving slowly and deliberately, constantly turning his head to make sure he was still locked onto the signal. Behind him, Piper asked, "Hey, Partogan, what are we looking for?" "My name is Maui Ririnui," he replied sternly, "and we're looking for a hyperwave relay. I just picked up its signal. Someone is transmitting a message, I think." Maui slowly moved up a staircase and onto the second floor. Behind him, Piper ducked into a security office and came out a moment later carrying a plasma rifle. "Just in case," she said. Emmanuel brought up the rear, unarmed and apprehensive. Maui and Piper had only moved a few feet down the hallway when Maui held up a hand and signaled everyone to stop. "Second door on my left," he whispered. "There's an enemy soldier with a rifle." Maui could see him through the wall. The man's body was generating enough heat to be detected by the smart glasses. Maui lifted his finger and pointed to the exact spot on the wall where the soldier was hidden. Slowly and quietly, Piper raised her own rifle and took aim. Maui watched the soldier's heat signature. He was getting ready to fight, loading his own weapon and preparing to shoot through the wall. Maui nodded at Piper. Piper's plasma rifle went off with a cannon blast, shaking the whole building. A 10-foot stretch of the wall collapsed, burying the bloody and mangled body of a UN soldier in plaster and metal. As the cavity opened up, Maui, Emmanuel, and Piper could get a good view of the object in the next room. A spherical device, roughly 10 feet in diameter, was nestled in a metal cradle. As it span counterclockwise, the device made a humming noise and emitted a yellow light. This was a hyperwave relay, a wondrous device that made real-time interstellar communication possible. And it was transmitting. "Shut it down!" Maui barked. Piper ran into the room and smashed the butt of her rifle against the power supply box. With a loud clunking sound, the hyperwave relay stopped spinning, and the yellow lights went out. Emmanuel found a computer terminal and pulled a portable hard drive from an external slot. He examined the drive and said, "Oh damn, this thing was jammed in there hard. He must have been desperate to get the data away from us. I bet he was ordered to destroy the drive as soon as the transmission finished." Maui snatched the hard drive from Emmanuel. "I'll take a closer look at this. Maybe the Shadow Man will be interested." Maui stepped back outside and returned to the Niagara, where Robert Lansing and George Farshdi were still using laptop computers to analyze all of the intel captured from the Blacksite. Maui asked for Robert to step away from his laptop, and before he started, Maui made sure to disconnect the computer from the Niagara's radio transmitter. He didn't want to send this data to the Shadow Man until he was sure it was valuable. Maui plugged the drive into the laptop and found... well, he only found 3 data files. He was expecting far more. They were labeled 1. UNN 13th Fleet Orbat. 2. Memo Dr. Spark. 3. Requested weapon test results. Maui opened the first file. Inside, he found a military document. United Nations Navy, 13th Starfleet, Order of Battle, Orbat, pending approval from Secretary General Pascal Etienne. Flagship, Scharnhorst-class Dreadnought, UNS Kurt Waldheim. Super capital ship, Charlemagne-class battlecruiser, UNS Charlemagne. Capital ship, Korea-class destroyer, UNS Incheon. Production ship, Jeanne d'Arc-class fleet carrier, UNS Jeanne d'Arc. Frigate, Mexico-class frigate, UNS Tenochtitlan, UNS Hidalgo, UNS Independencia, UNS Revolution. Special weapon delivery platform, Prophet-class command cruiser, UNS Akhenaten, UNS Confucius, UNS Zoroaster. Maui frowned as he read the list. Now, he was a Partogan, born and raised halfway across the galaxy, which meant that he did not know the exact details of the human military. But Maui was fairly certain of one thing. There was no such thing as the 13th Fleet. As far as he knew, the human race had only ever fielded 10 Starfleets. Plus, humans are very superstitious. For reasons Maui did not understand, humans were simply terrified of the number 13. There was no way they would ever append that number to one of their fleets. Confused, Maui decided to open up the second folder. Inside was an interdepartmental memo, and it said this: From Bakir Rafi to Shen Feng Kai, regarding special delivery. We found one. Our deep space probes found a starship with a planet-killing weapon adrift in the Sirban star system near the galactic core. It is deep inside the territory of the old kingdom of Partoga. Our shipbreakers confirm the vessel is a Partogan warship, the Riri Nui class planet killer Krast. The Krast was built in 1925 and saw action during the Lavakian uprising of 1928, where she was attacked and disabled by enemy forces. As best we can tell, the Krast has been drifting and derelict ever since 1928. Nobody has touched this thing in the past 150 years. The planet-killing weapon is intact. Partogan records indicate this thing was called a wrath cannon back in the 1920s. Etienne dispatched the French carrier Jeanne d'Arc to salvage the weapon. Secgen told them to deliver the planet killer straight to the Divine Atelier. That's where the planet killer is going. I know you're eager to get started with reverse engineering the Wrath Cannon and getting it ready for miniaturization, but you need to know, this thing is in bad shape. Whoever attacked the Krast blew away the entire stern of the ship. We can't find the drive section, bridge, or cannon control room. You'll have the gun, but we can't give you the trigger. You'll have to build a new one. Also, we carried out the weapon test you requested. The Space Rangers described your platform as being high risk, high reward. The phrase glass cannon was also used. See the attached file for a full breakdown. Best of luck. Rafi Bakir, United Nations Space Ranger Corps. Now this was interesting. Maui knew all about the Levakian uprising. It was a crucial event in the history of his own people. He quickly copied all of the data to his own computer. But before he could start transmitting data to the Shadow Man, Maui heard a shout. Corder and Piper had just emerged from one of the former Advent buildings and were screaming for the rest of their teammates to come here, quick! You've got to see this, Corder shouted. Dakota and the Chippewas agreed to guard the prisoners while all 6 of the Stormbreakers, plus Piper, re-entered the building. Emmanuel, George, and Robert followed behind them nervously. Inside, the Stormbreakers and their companions needed only seconds to understand why this place was a Blacksite. Once he was past the lobby, Maui used his smart glasses to scan each room. Guys, these are medical operating theaters. I see surgical beds and blood on the floor. On those words, weapons were drawn. Even tiny little Nainu, riding atop Setla's shoulders, gripped a laser pistol tightly in his hands. Maui craned his neck around, scanning the rest of the building. His smart glasses were working so hard that the frame was getting hot on his face. Piper and Corder pushed open a door and pointed inside. Just as Maui predicted, the group found an operating table and surgical tools. You can't see all the blood. It's dried out, Maui reported. But people died in this room. A lot of people, and none of them were human. We found this too, Corder said. She pointed to a tall and imposing door. It's locked, Piper said. I tried to force it, but I think the door is reinforced or something. Your half-Levakian friend says she smells something bad on the other side. Death, Corder said. I smell death. Maui scanned the door. Setla, Varian, Kingi, put your shoulders to the door, Maui ordered. It's not as strong as it looks. Against the strength of 3 Stormbreakers, the locked door gave way and crashed off its hinges. The team poured into the next room and gasped. What is this? Nainu breathed. Some kind of prison? That was what it felt like. The Stormbreakers had come upon a long hallway, lined with heavy doors. The team fanned out and were horrified by what they found. The hallway contained 30 prison cells, and each cell door had a small window to look through. Children. Alien children. No fewer than 20 alien children were imprisoned here. Setla and Nainu found a Levakian cub, barely alive, on the brink of starvation. Varian discovered a Partogan child, naked and terrified. Emmanuel found a Vanian fledgling, plucked of its feathers. Piper ran to the far end of the hallway and threw up, unable to handle the horror. Similarly overwhelmed, George Farshty fell to his knees and started praying to Jericho. "Open the cells!" Nainu cried out. "We've got to save them!" "Quickly," Maui added. "Some of these youngsters are dying." One by one, Setla stomped down the hallway, tearing each cell door off its hinges and liberating the occupant. Piper opened the hallway door and guided the alien kids outside. There were 4 Partogans, 2 Amadi, 7 Vanians, 1 Cybon, 1 Ashurian, 2 Celt, 2 Levakians, and 1 Higaran. All of them were their species equivalent of young children. The Vanian, Cybon, and Ashurian captives were bird-like avians, but they were too young to fly. The Celt were hatchlings, unable to fend for themselves. And finally, the Partogan children were old enough to walk and run, but their jailers were keeping them weak by depriving them of food and clothing. Once everyone was outside in the sunlight again, Nainu sat down with the alien children and started to talk to them, asking about what was going on. George Farshty tapped Varian on the shoulder. "That's a good decision," he said. "Nainu is the smallest and least threatening. He's perfect for interviewing those poor kids." "That's not the reason we let Nainu do the talking," Varian replied. "He's a polyglot. He can speak lots of languages." Nainu was in his element. He transitioned between languages flawlessly and without mistakes. He listened to the Levakian cubs intently before he turned his head to let out a series of deep growls in the Ashurian tongue. The alien children kept their eyes on Nainu, and he encouraged them to speak one at a time. There was also one particular moment that made Varian feel warm and cozy inside. Amongst the alien children was a lone member of the Cybon species. Just like Vanians and Amadi, the Cybon were an avian race, resembling very large and colorful birds. The Cybon fledgling, rescued from the Blacksite, was too young to fly on its own, but it was able to fluently speak its native language, which was very different from the other languages being spoken in the group. The little Cybon opened its beak and started to make a fast trilling sound, followed up with a melodic series of whistles. Nainu tapped his foot in rhythm with the young Cybon, and then he started to make similar noises. After a few moments, Nainu and the fledgling were harmonizing with each other, trading bird calls back and forth as though they were singing a duet. While Nainu interviewed the alien children, Lawrence and Piper ran back to where the Blacksite staff were being held. As soon as the Wolverines and Chippewas learned about the kidnapped alien children, things got unpleasant. Jay, Dakota, Bradley, and Sarah all got violent. Striking and cuffing the UN scientists as hard as they could, the Americans demanded to know the full story of what was happening to the young aliens. Meanwhile, Nainu made some headway with a Partogan child. The boy was 5 or 6 years old, but he was able to tell Nainu something very important. "There are more!" Nainu shouted to his fellow Stormbreakers. "There are more children in the Blacksite!" "Everyone spread out!" Varian yelled. "Start searching!" Nainu turned back to the alien child and spoke in near-fluent Partogan. "Ke he era atu?" "Where are the others?" The boy pointed to the far side of the Blacksite. "Vakaturia mai," Nainu said. "Show me." It was a strange sight, a 2-foot-tall lizard being led by the hand by a similarly sized child. Nainu followed the boy across the courtyard, between 2 buildings, and finally to an open field next to the landing pad where the Niagara was idling. "Ke konai ratau," said the boy. "They are here." Nainu looked around. There was nothing here. It was just a field. For just a moment, Nainu was confused. But his unspoken question was answered a moment later when the Partogan boy knelt down and started scooping dirt in his hands, as though searching for something beneath the surface. Nainu was already cold-blooded, but when he realized the truth, it felt like he fell into an icy pool and sank. Very few of the enemy survived interrogation.